I mean, yeah, I mean that has struck me as being quite a strong theme in your when reading your autobiography about you talk about a lot of these people that I've only known, people like Christopher Hill as, these intensely important intellectual chaps,
Mm.
and the witchcraft guy,
Evans Pritchard.
Thomas, yeah, and all those,
Yeah.
yeah, and yet I don't know them obviously, but you talk about them as being very, certainly Keith Thomas has been a good friend as well as everything else, which always struck me. And that, as a segue into that, the other thing that strikes me about your work, and I think this is one of the things that's important about what you've done and kind of unique, is the way that you've harnessed history to anthropology in a way that perhaps is quite powerful and quite unique, really, isn't it?
Well, just the footnote on Keith Thomas. I mean, that is a difficult relationship for me to quite understand, because he's 8 years older than me, and I was his first PhD student. And I half regard him as my teacher, perhaps 2/3 regard him as my teacher, and therefore it's difficult to be a friend with Keith. And his personality, which is very formidable and very strong and schoolmasterly,
Right.
makes a sort of cuddly, warm friendship. I mean, I can't imagine walking arm in arm with friend Keith, or anything like that.
Right.
And yet I think we have become friends. I mean, he's shown a friendship because he's helped me in ways which weren't required by our relationship, beyond the call of duty, as it were. And I feel an affection for him too. And certainly with Jack Goody.
Hmm.
Jack Goody was much more than just my mentor and patron in anthropology. He became a friend. And when my father died, he became a sort of quasi-father to me. So you can turn these relationships into, as I think is the case with some of my students in turn, they regard me not just as, oh, you were my PhD supervisor, Alan, but we've become friends.
Hmm.
Now, history and anthropology, there are, I mean, by good fortune and good chance, several things happened in my life. One was that I was coming into history at a time when anthropology and history have always been fairly close,
Hmm.
but like railway lines going alongside each other. In the 1950s, after the Second World War, they came as close as they've ever been to each other, for various historical and other reasons. Chance reasons, like the fact that the best anthropologist in England, Evans Pritchard, was trained as a historian, but other structural reasons of the time and so on. They came very close, so that just as I was going to start my DPhil, history and anthropology were really very close. And the person who brought them closest together on the historical side in Britain at that time was Keith Thomas. He'd written his article in 1963 on history and anthropology, and written earlier about it in 1961. He wanted to bring them together and written about it and was interested. And because he was beginning his great work on witchcraft, which drew on anthropological models, he wanted to learn about anthropology. So he said, Alan, you've got to go to anthropology lectures. You've got to meet these people. You've got to get to know them. And they were a friendly bunch, very friendly. That was one of the characteristics. They were a very small cult, as it were, which met the Lamb and Flag in Oxford, and the Eagle and Child, the Bird and Baby, as it was known. They were like Tolkien and co. in Oxford. They had a little clique of Leonhardt and the Leonhardts and Evans Pritchard and so on. And they absorbed me into that. I went and drank beer with them and went to their lectures and became friends with the PhD students and so on. So I became a quasi-member of the anthropological tribe just at the time when it was very interested in meeting historians.
Right.
Then I had the great good fortune of going on to the London School of Economics at a time when it was just at the end of its great period, the great post-Malinowski period, And the people there teaching were all Malinowski's pupils, like Raymond Firth and Lucy Mayer and so on. And there were also young, excellent, new blood like Robin Fox and so on. So I was at a peak period at the LSE for 2 years doing a master's. Mary Douglas was active down in New University College, and I formed her inner circle too. I went to the little soirees she held in Hampstead Heath.
Wow.
I'll tell you a Mary Douglas story just for the lighten the tone of it. Mary Douglas had just published her greatest book, Purity and Danger.
Yeah, we all had to read that.
Which argued the central message was that dirt is matter out of place. And I was part of her little circle with Alan Cooper and about 2 or 3 others. And we used to go and have tea or whatever it was with Mary on Hampstead Heath. And I was walking across Hampstead Heath and I came across a rubbish bin. And the Hampstead Council had put on it, "Dirt is matter out of place," which I later discovered was a Victorian saying. I burst into Mary's and said, Mary, your book, have you seen on the rubbish bins, they've got the motto of your book? And she was furious. She said, "Alan, are you saying that I stole my idea from the rubbish bin, etc.?" Anyway, so LSE was wonderful and refreshing after Oxford and a change. And I met, really became friends with some really good young anthropologists, Peter Loizos and so on. And then I went and did my fieldwork. So I was now almost the only person you'll discover who's got a PhD and master's in history and anthropology. But I could have then gone in one direction or the other.
Which,